Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 27th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with the southern part of Ukraine, but not from Zaporozhye or South Donetsk or Kherson. Today we're going to talk about Mariupol, to start with Mariupol, because we got a very interesting and, according to my opinion, the most important update of today. The Russians somehow managed to almost complete the building of the new railways that goes from the mainland in direction of Mariupol, to be more precise, in direction of the settlement by the name of Andriivka, this one. And the Russians are trying to connect two important cities. The first city is Andriivka, and the second entrance is going to be Kupiansk, this one. So there is a small railway in this area, as you can see, but this original railway ends in Komsomolsk, and after that there are no way to get further. And this is a very important construction that the Russians have almost completed, because according to information we have, according to understanding we have, the entire South Donetsk, Zaporozhye area, Kherson direction, Crimea these areas have just one connection with the mainland through Crimean bridge. And if the Ukrainians somehow find a solution how to destroy the bridge using the Navy drones or using missiles or using attacks, of course the entire area from Crimea, Kherson and Zaporozhye will be completely cut off from the mainland. And this area will be cut off from fuel, from food, from the all necessary things for people. Of course, there are going to be some possibilities to support this area with trucks on the road, but we understand that this is nothing in comparison with the railways. And of course, if we take a look from this angle on the map, we could say that there is already a railway, for example, from Donetsk that goes to Lugansk, and then goes to Volnovakh, and after that it goes to further to the Zaporozhye and Kherson direction. Yes, there is a railway, but we see that currently this railway, this part of the railway, let's mark it on map for better understanding what I'm talking about. This part of the railway lays right exactly on the combat line. And this area is under complete, of course, Ukrainian control. And that means that it is very dangerous to use this territory, this road, for supply and support, for fuel, and many other things. And of course, the Russians found a solution. They took a decision to make a very short area, to make a very short railway, and they have almost completed these tracks for around 80 or 90%. So even before the beginning of the next year, the Russians will be able to create the second safe road that connects Crimea, Kherson, Zaporozhye with the mainland. And of course, this situation will improve the Russian possibilities in Tokmak, in Bradley Square, in Zaporozhye, in South Donetsk. The Russians will be able to get more forces. They will be able to make faster rotations. They will be able to move forces from Kupiansk direction to, let's say, Zaporozhye and Kherson direction within a day. Now they need to spend a lot of time because they need to make a very big hooks, they need to use local trucks, and as soon as they complete this railway, they will be able to redeploy from one side of Ukraine to another significant number of forces. These things, of course, from one side. But from the other side, we understand that the Russians with these buildings are planning to continue special military operation. The Russians also understand that probably within the next 6 months or even 12 months, they will not be able to restore access, like 100% access with to the railways that goes from Volnovakh to Donetsk, and so a lot of conclusions we can make based on that. But anyway, we see some real improvements that will, of course, increase logistic possibilities and flexibility and mobile part of Russian forces. Now we are moving to Kupiansk direction. We are not going to start this video from Zaporozhye area because we have a lot of updates from Kupiansk area. And according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, of course, based on the numbers that were provided by the Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainians lost during the previous 24 hours 70 soldiers. We can say, and furthermore, around 15 soldiers just in Kupiansk direction. Of course, based on these numbers, we understand that the level of loss of the Ukrainian forces in this direction is the lowest probably since the beginning of the special military operation. So what is so important, why we started our conversation from this territory? Because we got a lot of updates, and the most important one probably is that The Russians, according to information that we got from the open source, managed to destroy another bridge along Oskol River, the bridge that connected two settlements, Sinkova and Kruglakovka. These two settlements, Kruglakovka, Sinkova, and this bridge was destroyed, and at least we got this update today. I'll remind you that during September, during this month, the Russians were mainly focused on the bridges that were located in the vicinity of Kupiansk, that connected the left and the right side of the settlement. This is the closest bridges to Sinkovka and the Petropavlovka area, and the Ukrainians were using these bridges to supply and support their forces on the combat line. But as yesterday, for example, we got another update that the Ukrainians managed to restore the bridge, and on this video the Russians showed that they managed to destroy not just the original bridge, but also the bridge or pontoon bridge that was located nearby. And all those days the Russians were focused mainly on Kupiansk. And now, as I understand, the Russians managed to destroy every single bridge exactly in Kupiansk, and currently they start moving to the south, and currently they try to destroy every single pontoon bridge and just a bridge along Oskol River to the south. And as I understand, currently the Ukrainians have lost their final or last possibilities to supply and support in Sinkovka and Petropavlovka and Kislovka, and now they need to use the bridges somewhere in the vicinity of Barovo to support and to supply this big army in this big territory. Anyway, we see the Ukrainians have significant problems in their logistic. And for example, today the Russian sources published a series of videos how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians, and as a result of counter-artillery duels, the Ukrainians lost significant number of artillery systems. So we see that the Russians are ready to start. And the question is what the Russians are planning to start, what are they ready to start? And today other Russian sources provided us that the Russians, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, the military authorities have already prepared around 12 storm platoons, even maybe less platoons, or squads, 12 storm squads in this direction. So around 2,000 soldiers have been prepared by the Russians to penetrate and to break through the Ukrainians' defense in this area. Furthermore, the Russians, according to the information we have from the open source, managed to concentrate around 110,000 soldiers. So the Russians are ready. They have concentrated army. They have created like storm assault squads. They have destroyed almost every single bridge along Oskol River. The Russians established complete and full artillery superiority in this area. Furthermore, we know that according to the information we have from the open source, Minister of Defense Shoigu personally controls this operation. He paid a lot of attention, a lot of time to prepare. So basically this is not just operation for Kupiansk or let's say Kupiansk direction. This is first of all a question of reputation of Minister of Defense, because by this attack he wants to tell people, because he doesn't have military education. He is not a military person, at least he used to be just a civilian person. He has civilian duties and civilian positions in the Russian authorities, and now he's Minister of Defense and he needs to show the results. And Kupiansk direction is his personal operation. So anyway, I expect the real clashes in this area very soon. And as I understand, there are going to be no problems with artillery rounds, with shells, with nothing. These forces will have everything they need, just with one purpose: to force the Ukrainians to step back on the Ukrainian side of Oskol River. And now we're moving to Kupiansk to Liman direction. We have also a lot of updates, and today we got very interesting video on how the Russians attacked the Ukrainian positions in the city by the name of Cherneshina. This area the Ukrainians used to supply and support their forces in the vicinity of Novoyevgorovka, the area which the Russians were trying to storm at least few times in a row just during September. Significant, and all those attempts were repelled by the Ukrainians, and during those attacks that the Russians were trying to implement during September, they managed to discover the Ukrainian positions, the main supply centers, the main ammo depots, and currently the Russians start attacking and bombing the Ukrainians before the next wave of attack, which obviously is going to take place very soon. And according to the Ministry of Defense plan, the Russians are going to attack in few directions. This is the first direction, like global scope, and this is the second direction, of course, from the north to the south, and the third direction is going to be somewhere going in direction of Liman. Probably there are going to be no even directions on Liman, and the main purpose of the Russians in this area to pin down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to counterattack or attack or something like this. Or the Russians on Liman direction will try to develop their offensive operation in direction of course, the city by the name of Liman. Why is that? Why the Russians can attack in this direction? The most important updates now, we're moving to Bakhmut, Klishchiivka, and the most important updates and most of the sources, either the Russians and the Ukrainians and the Western sources, confirmed that the Wagner group was redeployed in direction of Bakhmut. Currently, the number of Russian forces, the Wagner forces, is unknown. How many of them were redeployed in this direction? But the sources are saying that the main purpose of Wagner is to stabilize the front line and not to allow the Ukrainians to develop their offensive operation further. I believe that this is some kind of speculation, or at least attempts from the Russian side, from Wagner's side, to hide the real purposes of Wagner's in this area. And if you ask my opinion, I understand that there is no reason, no purpose to attack in direction of Klishchiivka or in direction of Andreevka, because some sources are saying that the main purpose of Wagner is not just to stabilize, but also to return positions that the Ministry of Defense lost during the battle, during the Ukrainian storming operation in direction of Klishchiivka and Andreevka. If you ask my opinion, I believe that this operation is just a waste of time and waste of such a priceless resource of Wagner's, of stormtroopers. I believe that the Russians do have plans in this area, and probably Wagner's were redeployed in this direction, but the main purpose of Wagner presence in this area is to continue their offensive operation on the northern part of Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, and to establish control over the settlements like Bogdanovka, Grigorievka, Orekhovo-Vasilyevka, Minkovka, and many others. So basically to develop their bridgehead on the northern part of Artyomovsk, but not on the southern one. Because if you ask my opinion, if now Wagner's, let's say, took a decision, or the Ministry of Defense took a decision to continue offensive operation further on the south, and if the Wagner's receive an order to continue attack, let's say in direction of Pritiechno, of Chasov Yar, we understand that among these fields, the Russians, or to be more precise, Wagner's, would appear in some kind of, let's say, artillery pocket, like fire pocket, and they would be destroyed by the Ukrainian artillery forces, at least from three sides, from Chasov Yar, from Konstantinovka, and from Toretsk. And the Wagners would appear in the same situation as Ukrainians currently appeared in Bradley Square, in Rabotina, Verbovo area. So there are no chances to survive and to get success if the Russians continue offensive operation in the fields between cities. Of course, you could say that, but during the first phase, during the Battle of Bakhmut, Wagners have already controlled this territory, and I would say that the main purpose of Russian attack in direction of Klishchiivka and Andreevka was to establish fire control over the main supply roads that goes from Chasov Yar and Konstantinovka to Bakhmut. So that was the only purpose, that was the only reason of Wagner attack in this direction. And as soon as they established this control over Ivanovska, the Wagner stopped, and there were no movements from their side. Maybe there are some points at some point and some interesting explanation if Wagner would try to get the canal and to force the Ukrainians to step back. From this perspective, of course, this is a very nice defense belt, but I'm not sure that Wagner will spend such an important resource to attack in direction of ruins of Klishchiivka and Andreevka, where they obviously gonna have significant number of losses. But the northern direction, of course, is the most important, because the more you take on the northern direction, the closer you get to the most important city and the most important area of the special military operation. We're talking about the cities like Kramatorsk, of course, obviously, and the city by the name of Slaviansk. And the second, of course, purpose of this attack is to encircle the Ukrainian forces in Sievert's direction, and this is the reason I told you that probably some forces on Liman direction will also attack in direction of Liman and Seversk Donetsk, because anyway, if the Russians want to complete the story of Donetsk direction and special military operation, sooner or later they need to cut Seversk like salient and to establish control over this foothold. And Wagners are the only guys who can do this, and who can do this, we can say, fast and with the minimal level of losses. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes on this area, as a result of artillery strikes, FPV drone strikes, air bombings, and so on, the Ukrainians lost 390 soldiers. As you can see, the level of losses is very heavy. Furthermore, the Ukrainians lost another 20 armored vehicles, including four tanks, and probably all these losses took place in the vicinity of Andreevka. As we discussed yesterday, there was a very heavy clashes, and today, as we discussed, the Russians published another small episode of clashes in this area as a result of artillery strike. Significant number of armored vehicles of Ukrainian forces were destroyed, and those armored vehicles haven't managed even to get the railways, the main area, the main purpose of that attack. So now let's move further to Donetsk direction, and we got also significant number of updates, and the most important updates are coming from the city by the name of Krasnogorovka, from this direction. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation and the Russian official pro-Kremlin channels published the video of clashes in this direction. There was a very powerful and significant artillery preparation, and after that the Russians launched a very powerful attack with the tanks, a lot of armored vehicles. At least on that episode we can see 3 armored vehicles that were moving from one side of the fields to another. The Russians continue bombing, and at some point they managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt. They managed to land the infantry, and after that the infantry managed to capture the strongholds and the trenches in this area. So that was the attack, very powerful attack, and as a result of this video was geolocated, and as a result of those clashes that took place probably today, or maybe yesterday, or at least this week, the Russians managed to capture something like this. So according to all this information, all these updates, we understand that the Russians probably reached the outskirts of the city of Krasnogorovka. So the next attack, if ever next attack is going to take place ever, is going to be attack inside of the city, and the Russians will be able to start, or will start, the clashes inside the city. Very interesting development, very interesting progress, and I'll remind you that the battle for Krasnogorovka started somewhere on the second half of June, when the Russians, as a result of attack, captured and took control over this coal mine. After they established control over this territory, the Russians managed to establish fire control and air control over the most important, the main areas, supply areas, which allowed the main Russian forces to continue advancing and moving along the railways. And today we saw the results of that operation, and one more time, the Russians are already on the edge of the city. So the same situation I expect to take place somewhere in the vicinity of Novomikhailivka, because today the Russians published more videos of missile strikes, artillery strikes in the city. A lot of buildings were destroyed, a lot of Ukrainian positions were destroyed. We don't have the numbers of the loss of Ukrainian forces, but as I understand, the losses were also very big. The only thing that we can say about Novomikhailivka is that there are 2 Novomikhailivka. One Novomikhailivka on the surface, and of course there is a very rich network of defense facilities below Novomikhailivka. We don't see the results of bombings of this type of area, but anyway, the Ukrainians do have very rich network below Novomikhailivka underground facilities. So there are still a lot of work, but when comparing these two cities like Novomikhailivka and Krasnogorovka, I expect that very soon the Russians will attack in this direction as well. But before that, of course, the Russians need to solve the issue with the defense belt of Ukrainian forces on the north of Novomikhailivka, which was retaken by the Ukrainians as a result of counteroffensives that took place probably this week or the week before. Now the Russians have concentrated their FPV forces in this area, and today they published a lot of videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians among these tree lines, among these trees and brushes with FPV drones, so which confirms Ukrainian control over this territory. So before the next video, because of all these geolocations, I will mark this territory as the area under Ukrainian control. When the Ukrainians managed to return this area, I don't know, but we haven't received any video or photo confirmation of counterattack, but we have photo confirmation and video confirmation of Russian strikes back in this territory. Now we're moving to South Donetsk area. When talking about Velika Novoselovka, there are no changes on the ground. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes on South Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 150 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems. But we need to understand that Krasnogorovka, this area where the Russians counterattacked, according to classification, is the part of South Donetsk direction. Donetsk direction, the middle Donetsk direction, starts from Krasnogorovka, Pesky, Первомайска, Oputne, Avdiivka, Bakhmut. This is Donetsk direction. South Donetsk direction starts from Krasnogorovka to Velika Novoselovka. This that's not small but arc. So probably most of the losses, according to the Ministry of Defense report, came to us from Krasnogorovka area, because when talking about Velika Novoselovka, there were no changes, there were no updates. As you can see, even there were no geolocated videos, which confirms that front line was completely stabilized. The Ukrainians don't have forces or power to continue any offensive in this area. Now we're moving to Zaporozhye direction. We have a lot of updates, a lot of details. We have already discussed the video of tank cemetery in this area, significant losses the Ukrainians had during the previous days of attempts to attack in direction of Verbova. More than hundreds of armored vehicles were destroyed. And today, right before I start making this video, the Russian sources reported that Ukrainians launched reconnaissance operation in direction of Kopany. It's very difficult to understand whether it was reconnaissance in force or reconnaissance in combat, but the most important is that Ukrainians understand that they don't have much time. They don't have time at all. In less than in a month, this area is going to be not very good for any offensive operation because of the poor quality of the ground, because of rainy weather. So that's why they took a decision to maintain their positions to the west of Robotyne, just with one purpose: to feel safe and to feel comfortable before winter. Because if the Ukrainians are not able to maintain their positions in the vicinity of Kopany, they will be defeated somewhere by the end of November, and they will be forced to step back before snow comes to Novodanilovka, because it's going to be very difficult to hold their positions among these fields, among very bad weather, without minimum support and supply. And this is going to be just another winter cemetery, but not of Ukrainian armored vehicles, probably of Ukrainian personnel. So for this reason, they need to maintain their positions in Kopany and of course in Verbova, to have at least 3 cities under their control, and then they will be able to fill these cities with vehicles and soldiers, and maybe they will have chances to survive and to hold these positions during winter, and by the next summer and spring to restart their offensive operation further to the south in direction of Tokmak. But it's just like speculations and projections. If you ask my opinion, I don't see any chances of Ukrainian forces to hold this territory and to keep this area under their control. The only thing they need is a massive penetration of the Russian defense belt, but we understand that the Ukrainians don't have chances to do this. Today we got more videos, more detailed videos with FPV drone strikes, and one more time, the Russians reported that just for unfinished September, the level of the number of strikes with FPV drones is around 500 for not complete September. In comparison with August, the Russians published at least 242 FPV drone strikes, so 2 times less. Imagine yourself what is going to happen before, let's say in December. I expect the number of FPV drone strikes around 1,000 per month. It's going to be a significant number, and of course nothing is able to survive under such a heavy pressure. When talking about Kherson direction, the Russians for some reason continue bombing and attacking the settlements like Berislav, Kazatske. Today they published more videos with FAB strikes. We see like 2 bombs, 2 strikes, 2 explosions. It's a classical usage of like Su-34 or Su-30 with FAB. 2 wings, 2 bombs, and the same story in Kazatske. Short positions of the Ukrainians along the bank of the river, 2 strikes, 2 bombs, 2 explosions. heavy losses. When talking about the level of losses, the Russians reported the Ukrainians lost around 45 soldiers in this direction, of course less in comparison with the previous days, but we understand and we remember that there are no close combat positions, close combat lines, and the level of losses of Ukrainians is just because of air bombings, FPV drone strikes and artillery strikes. And when talking about, of course, Zaporozhye area, the Ukrainians lost during the previous 24 hours 60 soldiers. The level of losses is also on the minimal level. In the end of this week, we will compare the numbers, the total numbers that provided by the Ministry of Defense with these weeks, and we will understand what is going on and what is the next Ukrainian steps, what are they going to do next. Are they going to dig in deeper, or maybe they're planning another offensive operation in direction of Tokmak and in direction of Azov Sea. So we'll see. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.